You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This is not my home. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network. That's full of a whole list of other Bat-related shows that also like to dive into other nerdy subjects that all of us, led by the great Peter R. Vera, love to frolic about in our free time. He's a frolicker. Don't let him tell you any different. Batman Book Club is also on Patreon. If you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support the show and join the others who have graciously joined Patreon and supported the show, go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. Now, thank you for listening to episode 187, year 2. Joining me on this adventure, I don't want to say it's been a while. He was on last year.
Been a while.
But he's a familiar voice on these here parts. He has many words written on Batman on Film. It's my pal Javi Trujillo.
So many words.
Javi, welcome back to the Batman Book Club.
Thank you, man. I think this is number 6. I was trying
Number
to
6.
count up.
6 is good.
6 is good.
Yeah, ask Knox. Excellent. I meant to count that up and see how many times. I think last year when you were on, we talked the Chalice, correct?
Yeah,
I think that was the last one you were on. Okay. Yeah, and then here we are now, episode 187, talking about a book from 1987. I'm down for this. I mean, I came in ready to talk this story because I'm actually pretty excited about talking about this one. So are you ready to talk about this one? Let's skip the appetizers. Let's go to the main dish. You ready?
I guess so. Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's dive in.
I was gonna regale you that,
Oh.
after the morning I had a meeting with good old Chip, me and my friend Chip. We had some cinnamon rolls for breakfast.
God damn it.
Talking
Javi.
future Batman plans.
Damn
So-
you. Damn you.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Well,
not
I'm
only
gonna
did we
go-
have like cinnamon rolls for breakfast,
Yeah.
we had a chaser of Skittles.
Well, I don't
know.
care so much about the Skittles.
We had some Skittles in honor of, but we only had the yellow and the purple and the red ones in honor of Peter Vera's favorite iteration of Batman, my buddy Zur.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the transition music by the great Christopher Drake, and I'm going to go to Cinnamon Roll.
Yes.
And then when it ends, I'll be back and we can talk Batman. So this story was written in 1987. 4 issues originally appeared in Detective Comics number 575 through 578 with Mike W. Barr as the writer, Alan Davis and Todd McFarlane as the
Who's that?
artist.
Who's that guy?
Yeah, as the
He never
artist.
did
for this
anything
one.
after this, did he? Like he never went on to do anything, I don't think.
No, not many. There's a whole list of colorists included to this in which let's see who we got. I had it down. I'm very professional today. Steve Oliff with Gloria Vasquez, and Todd McFarlane did some of his own colors as well. And we have another name. Nope, that's still old Stevie boy. I want to give credit to. Okay, there we go. We got them all. Steve Oliff with Gloria Vasquez, and Todd did some of his own as well. Let's see. This book, these issues, originally, like I said, released in 1987. You could buy them physically. They are available singly on DC Universe Infinite. There have been multiple releases, collected editions. It was released, what I saw, in a trade paperback in 1990. There's also a trade paperback released in 2002 that included the follow-up to Year Two with Full Circle. And then there was a deluxe edition hardcover released in 2017. The hardcover collection, the deluxe edition, is available on DC Universe Infinite Ultra. All this stuff's available digitally, and then of course the deluxe edition is available on my favorite app of all time, Hoopla. Whew. So,
Did they do a facsimile version of one of the issues recently, or am I just making that up?
I would not say you're making it up. I do not remember coming across one. So maybe I should also mention the first issue. So Detective Comics number 575 and the first chapter of Year Two was collected in the Legends of the Dark Knight, Alan Davis. And I'm going to talk about
Yes.
that also and bring that up when we dive into this discussion. So, Mr. Trujillo, which version of Year Two did you read for this episode?
All of them?
All
No,
of
that's
them.
not
Okay.
true. That's not true. Um, I was traveling when the bat signal went up,
Mm-hmm.
that the time was nigh.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go to DC Universe Infinite and started off that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I read like the first two or three issues that way.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to my deluxe edition to finish it off in style. But then I also had to go to my 1990 trade paperback
Excellent.
to read the intro because the intro by Barr is different than the one in the 30th anniversary deluxe edition, where he talks about the origins of this story. So I kind of jumped around, but I'm a little hesitant on the trade because I mean it's still holding up, but the binding, the glue is a
Sure.
little weak from the cover to the first page now because this is old. This is 34 years old that I've had this, and it's in really good shape, other than that glue being a little off. But it's a treasure. I've had
What's
it for a long time.
the intro by Barr? What's it titled in your
Uh,
1990 trade?
Batman Year Two, Take Two. It was written in
Okay.
October of '89.
Okay. Nifty. Yeah, so that's interesting. So I also did a combination. Um, in that Batman Year Two, Fear the Reaper, the trade paperback released in
I love
2002.
that cover. That
It's
cover's
where
so
I
good.
I read that, but then I also checked it out on Hoopla and read it on there as well. And like you said, so there's an intro called On the Shoulders of Giants, an introduction written by Mike W. Barr. In my 2002 trade, that's the first um, intro. Like that's at the beginning. In the like reading on Hoopla, the 30th edition, the deluxe hardcover collection, that On the Shoulders of Giants is in the back of the book, and there's a new one written that's at the
Ah,
front.
okay.
So yours being Year Two, Take Two, I really am curious what information is like released in that. So Barr did three, he wrote three different introductions for three different versions. And I'm curious because in uh just like what was maybe said in your intro because Full Circle had not come out yet. And just like up front, we're not going to talk Full Circle because that's a separate story. And who knows, maybe Javi will accept an invite back here to talk Full Circle one day. But I'm
Always.
just
I
curious with
have
the
a lot
intro
of
on that trade,
um
if it says much that's
it
worth.
it's yeah, it starts off that this year two was a genesis for a treatment he wrote in March of 1984
Mm,
called Batman 1980. And he was
yes.
trying to make a more coherent story out of Batman's origins, including like
Hmm.
his relationship with Gordon, some questions like why he doesn't carry a gun. And he was just trying to make sense of it all. So he wrote it on spec just for himself. Like it wasn't something DC hired him to do. So he wrote the story. He took it to the editors, and they were quite happy with Batman's history as it stood, and they had no plans to change it. Thank you very much. So he shrugged and put the story away, and hopefully, maybe he could use it on an original character.
Mm.
And then he became the writer of Detective 2 years later, and he was informed about them doing Batman Year Two to follow Year One. And at one point, they were going to run in chronological order. Um, but he's like, what a good idea. And dusted off his Batman 1980 treatment. And he says in the intro that Year Two has about 75% of his ideas from Batman 1980. With some of them being unsuitable after reading Frank's scripts for Year One.
Yeah.
So,
I think it probably worked out better by using that title of year two because the year one year blah 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 stuff is now it's almost a well that I feel DC goes back to too much. But coming right hot off the presses following year one marketing, it is a good like it's a good idea. Um
yeah,
so I mean I can't fault them for that. Do you remember the first time that you read this?
it was this trade. So, 1990,
1990?
probably
Excellent.
at my friend Anthony's house,
Hmm.
who his mom was a little leery of the cover because Batman is holding a gun and his Team Yellow Oval logo is scratched, crossed out, and bloody, and she didn't know if it was suitable for some 13-year-olds to read, apparently.
That
That's
is
my
a
recollection of it.
And that's a great image. Um, I think. And so I thought so this my trade cover, Fear the Reaper, is a prettier image than when you open, and that just seems like older and darker and like dirtier, kind of a
Yeah.
grungier kind of image. And I like that a lot. And I'm like, man, I wonder what this one was used. And then I saw it's the cover of the 1990 trade. And then I also saw as you just picked up your deluxe edition hardcover, it's part of the book itself underneath the dust jacket. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
it is. It is. And here's what's weird about this, and I was going to put up a tweet on it. The Year Two, the 1990 trade, has Batman with eyes, which in 1990 was not something you
Hmm.
see a lot of. And I feel like I'm used to it now with all the movies, especially the Batman with the Arkham games. But when you take off the dust jacket of the deluxe edition and it reuses that 1990 trade art,
Hmm.
Batman is white eyes only. There's no pupils at all. It's your classic Batman.
When you open mine, oops, where am I going? There am I? No pupils.
No
So
pupils.
maybe you've just
So
got an aired one.
so it's weird to me because what stood out to me in 1990 as being odd and different
Yeah.
now looks strange to have the classic version. Like now the classic version doesn't look right to me.
Oh boy. Oh geez.
But I like your trade because that's the full circle cover, which I remember seeing that promo art for the first time and just being blown away by just how Alan Davis draws Batman. He's such a phenomenal Batman artist who doesn't get enough
Quite an
credit.
image. Quite an
I
image.
mean, he's got his own book, but
Hmm.
um like I
Well,
don't think they've ever done like a black and white statue of his
mm,
stuff.
true.
So,
Uh, this, I don't think it, like, I honestly can't remember if it was 2002 or 2003. It preceded buying Long Halloween in the fall of 2003 or 2004. Oh my gosh, I'm getting them all mixed up. I think it was 2003. This, now look at this ordering online. I bought this year one and the Killing Joke. I had a
wow.
very small selection. I had the greatest Batman stories ever told, A Lonely Place of Dying, and I think those were my and Nightfall Part One, Two, and Three. No, that was kind of like my trade collection at that point. And then I had single
All
issues.
essentials.
And then yeah, I got money and I was like, I'm buying Batman comics, and this was part of it. Because I'm like, well, I can't get year one and not get year two. I gotta get year two. So I remember reading it. Like those are some good times of like if you think about it of like because that was around when I read year one for the first time when I read Killing Joke for the first time like this was included in that core group when I had a bat shelf and it was just like one shelf and not a bat bookcase times five.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're the
Um,
librarian. You've got to have
I do
a
now.
whole bookcase
I've
now.
had to put in the work to fill a bookcase. Why year two?
It's just one of those seminal stories from my youth,
Hmm.
as a Batman fan that I really love. Definitely, like you, was one of my first trades. It's not the first, but it was up there. So it was
Yeah.
something I read a lot,
Hmm.
and part of me likes it more than year one, or at least I did back then. But let me explain.
Easy, easy, boy.
Year one has grown in my estimation tremendously since I was a naive 12-year-old. Um, I think one of the things I really gravitated towards year two a lot was that it's a Batman story
Yeah,
primarily,
I get
and
that.
Gordon's a supporting character versus year one, Gordon's more the lead. And it's half a Batman story at most. Um, and so I think that's why I liked it a little bit more. But now, I don't know, I'd probably give the edge to year one now because I can see just what a masterpiece it is, and so excited to get that IDW release that's like coming out this summer of the Mazzucchelli art. That's going to be
Hmm.
amazing to see.
Hmm. Um, I
But
forget
I
when
picked it because like no one talks about this story really. Like it's kind of forgotten. The Reaper's gotten used after
it's
Full
funny.
Circle like
eh,
twice.
It's funny because it's one that I expect. So at the time of this recording, I haven't mentioned that we're doing this, that we're covering this book. When I do, I just feel like it's one that's going to get reactions. It's going to get thoughts and opinions, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? And not like oh my God, everybody in social media is gonna react. It's just no, it's one in Batman comic book readers is like they know this story. But like you said too, of like sometimes it can be um what do you want to say? Skipped over? Not talked
Overshadowed.
about, overshadowed. Yeah. I am the shadows. So yeah, I mean, I forget when you and I first brought it up, but I think it was brought up in the conversation when we talked about the chalice, I think. And I think you went with the chalice first. And then that's how we ended up landing on like, okay, well, then that just means when you're back home, we'll talk year two. Something that's interesting in looking at this is the the Reaper. So this in the My Trade, it's just, Batman year two, Fear the Reaper.
Mhm.
The chapter breakdowns, the very first part slash first chapter there, Detective Comics 575 is titled Fear the Reaper. Um, the Reaper itself, we talked about this, me and good old Ryan Haas on the Spooky Month in 2021, the first of October, episode 78, October 2021, Batman number 237, Night of the Reaper. Very
Not the same guy.
similar aesthetic,
Yeah.
but definitely reworked, and the character itself is vastly different. And then in Batman Life After Death that Tony Daniel wrote and drew, he did like uh, a remix of the character of the Reaper, but more so based on that Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, Batman 237 design than this Reaper. So this Reaper kind of in the sequel Full Circle design kind of just stays in its own what do you want to say, corner, if you will.
Yeah, and I meant to look at it again before we recorded. He shows up in the Scott Snyder run, like maybe midway through for like an issue. But I don't think they really go into who's underneath the mask or anything like that. But I always appreciated seeing the character again.
I came across that too, and I meant to jot that down and then look it up because obviously many of us around these here parts we've read Scott Snyder's Batman run. But I'm really I'm looking. Detective Comics Annual 2019.
Okay.
Um,
So yeah, there was an annual then, but it's somewhere in there. I want to say it's before like the Robo Bunny Batman, before all that stuff.
yeah, now I'm curious. I'm gonna have to go through and look. See if I fail. I'm
Well,
not
I
a
mean, this is
librarian. I don't know any of this. I
this
know
has
it was
always been just something I wanted to get to with you, but it's like we focus so much on like the Batman stories I read when I was a kid between like year three and Legends of the Dark Knight and I just wanted to pace it out a little bit, you know.
sure. And well, you know what? And that's talking about another story. And we're here talking about year two. So the Reaper himself, and I know I brought him up. Um, I think we can, I don't know. There's a couple different elements in this year two, 4 issue story. And like what I jotted down is kind of like the biggest like seeds of the story are the Reaper, Joe Chill, Batman Gun, and
Yeah.
Rachel Caspian.
Mhm.
Um, I think those are the biggest takeaways. And just before we talk specifically about each one, I think generic thoughts of this story is I enjoy it. I think it's good. I think it could be better. I think it would have benefited by at least one more issue, maybe 2 issues, because there's some quick jumping things, and the biggest part of that to me is the Rachel character.
Mhm.
Rachel, the that is just it's so sped through, and I really think something that's done that I guess it just depends on how you feel is how quickly the identity of the Reaper is revealed. Uh, they don't let that mystery linger. It's just like this is who it is. Now,
Yeah, it's not a
pending what you
mystery
prefer,
at all.
pending what you prefer, that could be cool because then it can create a whole like, oh, but Bruce doesn't know. Sort of thing as you're seeing them shake each other's hands and talk at dinner and stuff like that. It's like that's an interesting perspective. I wonder how it would have worked if we didn't know who the Reaper was too. So like that part's interesting to me, and I think they probably could have milked that a little bit longer. They could have milked the quote unquote clashing of Gordon and Batman maybe just a little bit longer. And then yeah, I think of those things that I just kind of like announced. I do think the Joe Chill Batman gun angles are that's given the most time and weight in these 4 issues. I don't think that's shortchanged at all.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously they went with four because year one was 4 issues, but in one of the things that threw me off about year two is because I did read it after year one.
Hmm.
So I was expecting it to be January 1st, January 15th,
Sure. Yeah.
February 2nd. And year two is pretty much a month, maybe out of year two. I mean, it's hard to say, but it's not a very long stretch of time. It's not the entire year. It's a specific incident
Hmm.
that defined that year for Batman. And I would throw Leslie Tompkins as being an important factor in this story as well. And that was one of the things Barr tried to do was like bring in, reintroduce Leslie earlier in the timeline and how she was formative of Batman being Batman in his early days, not just the night the Waynes died.
Okay. I
But
want to let's stay on her
okay.
as you can justify why you want to bring her into the conversation. She's one that I also feel like she needs more to do. Um she just kind of hops in and it's just like it's almost like says the same stuff that Alfred says to me. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about the character. I love Leslie Tompkins. I'm saying like in this story of like I think another issue or two could have made her more powerful than what's given here. So I don't think you're not like on the complete opposite side of me, but I mean a little bit, and like you think like she has good material. She's in this enough. She's a good standout part of this story.
What I like about Leslie and Alfred in this is they're kind of the surrogate parents for Bruce.
Mhm.
You know, Alfred standing in for Thomas and Leslie standing in for Martha. Why did you say that name? Um, and so I like that i- she is very much like his mother. He's trying to please her by giving her the penthouse of, Wayne Tower and doing all these things for her, and how it, how he turns around when he makes his realization at the end, by giving her something that what she really wants, not what Bruce wants her to have. And she's important too because she's that catalyst for him meeting Rachel. Um,
True.
and and I feel like she's more disapproving of Batman's nightlife than Alfred is, at least at this point.
Yeah,
He's
okay, I'll give you that. Sure. Because I'm she directly has dialogue concerning him going out, whereas Alfred is more of the supportive, I have your suits, sort of deal. And she is, I think my impression of her in the story though is like because of my informed opinion of her in the comics and Batman the Animated Series.
Mhm.
So by saying Leslie Tompkins when I first read this, even it was like, oh yeah, she has the clinic and she knows who Bruce is and she helps Bruce, they're allies and blah blah blah. And it's like, but not much of that was formed by these four issues. It was
Yeah,
formed by other things. Um,
I can see that.
and so that's just where I kind of feel like, oh, I feel like there could be maybe more with her if they gave another issue or two. That's like the only kind of shortchanging that I feel about. Um, but I think what she's also given is like so maybe I just contradict myself in saying that, like I do think it's not uh she they Barr makes use of her appearance, quote, on screen, to, like you just said, she's catalyst to meeting Rachel. It's like, okay, otherwise, how does Bruce meet Rachel? Okay, Leslie, she makes it. Okay, Bruce, he has a good, like, little, like, character, um, not redemption, but like a good moment by instead of building the high tower and stuff, and Leslie, it's like the one line of how she's like, basically, her patients aren't going to come down here. He at the end of, hey, here's the clinic, more so in your neighborhood where your patients are, and they're gonna come. It's not some fancy penthouse tower. This is more of what you would want. It's like that's a feel good little moment that adds to like the relationship of Leslie and Bruce in comics, in the TV series and stuff.
Well, and it speaks to like the tragedy too of Batman.
Yeah.
Because why is he Batman? Because his parents got murdered. Instead of moving on, pardon me, he's like stuck in that moment. He's frozen. And here he has two people that are surrogate parents, like we just talked about. And he can move on and have a life. He could be this great philanthropist and have a mother and father to turn to, and Alfred and Leslie. Like he has that moment, that rebellious son moment, where he's like, I'm gonna go see Rachel, whether you approve of it or not, Leslie. Like he's throwing it in her face, like, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, mom, and you can't stop me. And she's like, no, I think you're great. You should go together. He's like, well, okay then. I guess I'm gonna go, and I don't know, it's an interesting dynamic that we don't really get to see, but it's the whole fortune cookie aspect of it. We can try to avoid our fate, but we can't escape it, or something like that. The cookie that he gets at the restaurant. So I mean, yeah, you could definitely always go with use more Leslie Tompkins, but I think she was a pretty important part of the books. It's not something we get to see a lot of in the Batman stories, as important as a character as she is, and how maligned she's been in some storylines like War Games.
Um, all right, let's go. I'll get it out of the way then now. And then the Rachel character,
Little undercooked.
almost raw,
Yeah.
like that much undercooked. I don't, besides the end of the story, I don't see that removing her would hurt the story at all.
Mm,
Because Bruce jumps to like, hey, and you are, hey, can I see you again sometime? She's like, no, because I'm going to become a nun. And then it's, hey, let's go get ice cream in the park. Let me drop it. All right, let's kiss. And then the next appearance is, I love Rachel more than I've loved anybody else in my entire life. And then here's a ring. And it's like, what the hell just happened? It
there's a
jumps so fast.
yeah.
Too much. It skips, leaps frogs. There you go. Perfect English. It jumps over just too many like character building to give it weight for the end, which on its own is a pretty good impactful moment. But there's just not much before that that really makes it sting or hurt.
There's a lot of it feels like there's a lot of stuff that we didn't see off camera. Like there's a lot of deleted scenes that are on the cutting room floor of this relationship to sacrifice for the story plot. Um, because she gives him like this, it's very Spider-Man-y is what I was thinking of when I was reading it over this past week. Because he's got the conflict of how, his superhero life is getting in the way of his personal life, and the worlds are bleeding together between, Batman fighting the Reaper, and the Reaper being, the father of, for this point, the love of his life. Because I mean, let's face it, like when you're young, you can fall in and out of love at the drop of a hat sometimes, and Bruce being kind of stunted with relationships, like to find someone who he thought was going to be this shallow person, and she suffered the same tragedy as he did, but she's going about it,
Hmm.
her acts of service, in a different way. And I think that's what the appeal is. And it can kind of get glossed over amidst all the other storytelling of the Joe Chill of it all and bringing down the Reaper. And so it does, I feel like you're right. It does suffer that we don't get enough development on it, especially from
Yeah.
like a modern context where if this was a modern story, it would be 6 parts and not four.
Yeah.
So Barr would have a lot more room to play with, I feel like. But I like as short changed as it is, I do like the dynamic. You're just basically filling in your own gaps onto the relationship.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the
Eh,
downfall of it
eh.
is.
And her as a character, I have nothing negative to say because she seems very like Barr's written her as genuine and as someone who, she sees through Bruce's public performance. She sees
Yeah.
through it in everything. It's just she's not given enough for that. And then the end, the moment of where, he goes to see her and she basically says, Bruce, my father, and he's like, I know Rachel. And she's like, I have to make amends for what he did. And then she's holding up the nun attire. And it's just like, Bruce, I'm so sorry. And he says, I do understand, Rachel. And he leaves her. And I'm like, that's a good moment. That's a like it's weird to say that that's a good moment. But, you know, Bruce basically he was going all in and then he got basically denied. It was just like, nope. And it takes her right back to where she was at the beginning of the story. Except now she's completely parentless. Um, I feel like that could have just packed more of an oomph with more material for her. Not that we're filling in and that we're trying to make up for ourselves. It because sometimes if I have to stop and think about it, where Bruce has to say, like I love her more than anybody else ever. If I'm stopping, I'm like, dude, she doesn't even have many pages. Then it's like I feel like for me, there's something wrong there. Not that I needed him to list of even a comic montage of them going, skipping, frolicking in the park for ice cream, eating fruity pebbles together in the morning, something like that. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's at least showing, okay, over time we've done this, but instead it feels, yeah. So now I'm just kind of like circling the drain, saying the same stuff, but that's kind of my quote unquote issue with the rushed factor of Rachel. Rachel.
Yeah, we don't get as much of the relationship as I would like. And I think
Hmm.
we do get some hints of it later in Full Circle, kind of, but I can see where you're coming from. It definitely doesn't feel like
Okay. Oh,
enough,
thank God.
especially if you want to compare it to something that came after Mask of the Phantasm,
I've heard of that
which,
movie.
yeah, seeing that, um, the first time I watched it, I'm just thinking this is kind of like Batman Year Two. This is like Batman Year Two. You got Batman falling in love with someone, and there's this guy in a skull mask who sounds exactly like his love interest's father because it's the same voice. It was very much this Year Two is very much in my mind the first time I saw Mask of the Phantasm in the theater.
I'm trying to think which part it was because that's also something um readers, listeners of this podcast with this story instantly go to. There's a link between Year Two and Mask of the Phantasm. And it's said everywhere. I've never come across anything that have had the people behind the animated series say, "Oh yes, absolutely, Year Two," but you can feel the inspired by for the reasons that you just said. And there is in chapter two called "Deal with the Devil," and I think it happens to old Big Willie Galanka. Love the name. Bring him back in Gotham. I'm just saying. But there's a moment on that. It might be like the third page of or second or something where the Reaper has a gun pointed at his head. And he's like, in the last moments of your life, you at last know wisdom, William Galanka. To me, completely felt your angel of death awaits, you
Yeah.
know? And so uh, with that, and then like you said, the pure like the skull faced ish stuff and like the the weapons on the hand, it feels very much like, oh, this I can totally see this is a cousin of the Phantasm, or the Phantasm is a cousin of the Reaper. Like I see the link, and then you throw in the father-daughter aspect relation to Bruce. It's like, oh, okay, there's another factor, and though Phantasm twists it a little bit, it's still there. So those are like the links instantly that I think it's valid. If anybody says, you know, Phantasm was inspired by Year Two, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I think so too.
I mean, let's start the Twitter campaign now for William Galanka for the Penguin supporting character.
Big
Let's go.
Willie Golonka.
Big Willie.
Big Willie.
Big
Big
Willie as
Willie
the
style's
Penguin.
all in it.
Which
Um,
I'm curious, which story did you come across first, Mask of the Phantasm or Year Two?
Phantasm.
Okay.
I
Did
saw
did this feel
Phantasm.
derivative when you read it then?
No,
That's good.
I don't think so at all. I honestly don't know what connections I thought when I first read this. Because I'd have been, I mean, I was like 15 or 16. Trying to think. Yeah, I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know. I can't tell it. I can't speak for it. I'm not gonna make anything up either. Well, actually, Javi, I was really smart. My she. Um, so we talk about okay, let's talk about some story beats in this because I think Barr does pack a lot into these four issues.
Yeah.
Which I applaud and I respect, and I do actually think that they're good. I think I don't know what's the bigger headline out of this story, the Reaper himself, Joe Chill's inclusion, or Batman with a gun. The cover of your trade of Batman holding that gun, I wonder if they haven't used that cover since your trade because of almost people now trying to erase history that Batman's never used a gun before. And because of that firm stance, that it's just like we just don't want that image out front and center anymore. So I don't know with Year Two which part maybe Year Two's most known for. What would you think?
I mean, it's a pretty stark image.
I'm gonna
And
scratch Joe Chill. I think it's either people think year two and instantly think the Reaper, or they think Batman with a gun.
yeah,
I think Joe Chill comes behind both of those.
I think, yeah, for like for lack of a better term, for like a GA perspective,
Yeah.
you know, if you're not really into Batman that much, it would be the Reaper or the gun. But I think the Reaper would probably, especially from this standpoint, would be more like, is that the Phantasm versus
Mm,
Batman with a gun? I think just it stands out because it's so antithetical to the character, and that's the whole point
yeah.
that Barr is trying to make in the story.
That image, that drawing, would give a knee-jerk reaction to anybody, I think. Of kind of, wait,
Yeah,
what?
and
Wait,
I think
what?
that's very purposeful why that's the cover of it's a different image, but
Hmm.
the cover for 575 with him holding the gun and having the holster strapped to his chest with the line cutting through the his symbol.
Yeah.
Like I think that's very intentional to get readers' attentions because every cover, I'm double checking myself. Yeah, every cover for this four-issue series has Batman holding a gun. So I think that probably would be the standout
Barr was not trying to
for
make
the
it subtle.
series. No.
Hey, Batman's got a gun in this story. So
And
with
it's
that,
not, it doesn't feel like it's a political thing either. Like if this happened today, I'm sure there would be
it'd
a
be
whole
very
bunch of
political. Yeah,
trolls
I agree.
commenting and everything, but it's
The context of the story and the context
yeah.
of the image itself would be lost and not spoken of.
And it's not even the fact that it's a gun either, which I think you can't tell just from looking at the covers. It's the gun that murdered his parents specifically,
Hmm.
which once you read it adds that different layer to it. Like it's even worse than you think it is for the character because it's not just a gun, it's
Hmm.
the gun.
So it's
So
introduced in the story after Batman gets his ass kicked by the Reaper in their first meetup. And by ass kicked, I mean ass
yeah,
kicked. He stands no chance. He gets shot at by the Reaper. Um, I used everything I had, all my skill, all my strength, and it still wasn't enough, is what he tells Leslie. And then he looks up at the picture of his parents and he says, I've always dreaded this, but perhaps the only way to avenge them is to fight my enemy on his own terms, to fight the kind of men who killed them with the weapon that made me what I am, the gun that took their lives. I'll give it to Bar 2. He does a really good, like, not cliffhanger of each at the end of each issue, but a big like, oh, where's she going with this? Like
yeah,
that's the last panel is Bruce like holding that gun. Like
a good tease.
yeah, the
Yeah,
end of issue two is him face to face with Joe Chill. I'm trying to think three again, maybe a little bit less so, but I mean still it's him as Batman holding the gun, with his back turned to Joe Chill. So I mean Bart did a good job of ending each issue on a point of intrigue. With the gun here, I think in the context of the story, if you can sit and when you're reading it and you think about it, Bruce's position as Batman, I think it totally works that young in his career as the Caped Crusader that he would think about a gun.
well, yeah,
I think that
it's year
it's a
two, right?
yeah, he's young, like I don't know. He was headstrong for a year, but then he just like got if you want to take year one as is, and then this follows up from year one. Oh no, it was a whole SWAT team in year one
But like
that
year
he
one
escaped. This
is
is one on like one guy, and he just got completely demolished.
yeah. But like year one is him against crooked cops
Hmm.
and gangsters. Like this is year two, and this is the first time he's, as far as we can tell, this is the first time he's facing a costume threat.
Hmm.
And not only is it a costume threat that's on his level, someone who's even bigger than him, it's like the OG Gotham vigilante.
Yeah.
Like and he's all armored up just like Batman is. He has tricks just like Batman does, but he's not afraid to kill. In fact, he relishes it. So
Hmm.
it makes sense in that perspective of like why he would turn, to the gun. This isn't a Batman who's fought the Joker and Riddler dozens upon dozens of times before. Like, he doesn't know what to do at this point.
Yeah. Yes,
And
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I found it really interesting too, looking at it from that year one, year two perspective of
Hmm.
looking at like the Long Halloween as like the transition between the
It's a
mob to
good
the
book.
freaks. I've heard about it. I don't know anyone who's read it, but
Oh, okay.
I've heard of it. Um, Looking at that transition from one
Hmm.
type of villain to the other, like this lines up perfectly with that. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but by the end of this, like the Reapers cleared out a lot of Gotham's mafia, and it's not overt. Um, it's not like overtly said where they make a big deal about it, but he cleans house, so it kind of sets the stage for the rise of the supervillain.
It's one that we've seen before too, or we've seen since of the topic of Batman's way versus somebody who's a more extreme version of Batman.
Yeah.
And Batman's like, this is how it needs to be done. The more extreme versions, you could argue, are getting more results. And you can see reactions to the more extreme version of like this. This is working. This is kind of working. Um, I think the fact of bringing up this Reaper character and how a lot of sometimes it can totally bother me of somebody just comes in out of nowhere and then exposition dump on their history and then we just need to accept it. This I think works well for me because it's not so reliant on everything that happened in the past that we didn't know. It's just like quickly kind of referenced of like at the beginning as the TV host is talking to Gordon and it's just like, reminds us of the Reaper character of 20 years ago. And that's just kind of all you really need to know. And then Caspian
Yeah.
returns to see Rachel, and then Bar's like, "Well, let's not even hide this," and shows him go to his closet and open up, and there's the whole Reaper outfit. And then he goes out and he just starts, he picks back up, and it's like I don't know. It feels like a pretty like smooth or easy way to just accept him entering the story, and we're off and running. And it works for me. It doesn't cause speed bumps for me or make me hesitate to think like, wait, hold on a second, this isn't really working. It worked for me. I think it's always worked for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. The economy of the storytelling is really good. And you do feel a little bit of a connection with year one, how the promotion of Gordon at the end of that to captain versus now he's commissioner.
That's I think the only part to me that feels connected to year one is that first couple pages Gordon on TV with the TV host. And to me that just feels like that's it. And then this kind of ends up being its own thing.
Well, there's
Maybe just be
and
me.
Barr mentions it too in his many intros that
Yeah.
there's you've got Batman fighting the cops again,
Hmm.
very similar to year one. He homages the narration to his father in the third issue. So there's some loose connectivity to it, but it's where year one zigs, like year two zags.
Yeah.
You know, year one was spread out. This is very concise.
And
Um,
Bar, I forget which intro it is, like you said, the many he has, uh, where he mentions about Miller's Batman and Barr's Batman are very different. They
yeah,
both love the character, but they love him almost for different reasons and love different parts about him.
yeah,
Whereas I forget the exact wording, but the one he mentioned of like Frank likes to know like what makes him tick, basically. And Barr loves the Bat Cave, the sidekicks, the Batmobile, stuff like that. The Rogues Gallery, and stuff like that too. So it doesn't surprise me. How old did you say you were when you first read it?
13.
13.
Yeah,
Yeah, these four issues, like Batman's in them suited and fighting as Batman.
Yeah.
So it would totally make sense that, especially I think at a younger age, it's like you're not as interested. I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for you. I wasn't as interested as like Bruce Wayne on screen. It's like, where's the bat costume? You know, year two provides the bat costume. Year one doesn't provide a ton of the bat costume.
No.
Year one goes to Gordon a lot, and then to Bruce Wayne, and you're like, okay, well, where's Batman? When I was younger, this is like a little bit of Gordon, Batman, 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 little Bruce Wayne, Batman, Batman, Batman. So, it was good for my eyes of like, oh God, there he is. There's Batman. Oh no, he just got beaten up by uh, a skeleton. Sort of deal.
And there's some good Batman in
There's
this storyline.
the,
There's a lot of good Batman.
it doesn't, I understand different time periods. He's very talky with the opening criminals that he takes down, almost a little
Yeah.
cheese. And actually, in reading this Legends of the Dark Knight, Alan Davis, it's got a bunch of the Bar Davis Detective Comics issues.
Yes.
And
Which
Batman's
is
a little,
so
he's a little cheesy
yeah.
and stuff. They're enjoyable. They are enjoyable stories, period. I like them. Um, but he does make his Batman a little talky in an environment, which is funny because it does make me think, and it might just be because I have it on the brain. I just watched RoboCop, and that dirty 80s city vibe. I think this Gotham is dirty 80s
Oh yeah.
city. But then
For
it's weird
sure.
to have Batman be a little like, I've got some lines to tell you criminals, as opposed to just being like someone from the shadows and then just whipping ass.
Well, when we did A Lonely Place of Dying, and
Hmm.
not A Lonely Place of Dying, Death in the Family, and I
Death in the
read
family.
from like Batman 400 to 429
Yeah.
to prep for that. 80s Batman liked to talk. He liked the sound
Yeah.
of his own voice quite a bit. A lot. I kind of think that, not researching it that much, like that was the shift to like the more silent Batman was a Death in the Family, I feel like. But I love reading year two, and
Hmm.
then when Full Circle came out, and then having gone back and read the bar stuff that he did with Alan Davis, it's it's very much a world that they created.
Yeah.
There are recurring characters at like the bars, and it's a very lived in, gritty Gotham. And
Yeah.
Jack and I watched the Batman last night,
That's a good movie.
which is also set during year two,
Hmm.
as it says it on the thing. So there's a lot of just interesting parallels between the worlds of just Batman knocking at the door of the club. Like that's stuff that Barr did in his work with Davis, that I thought of that parallel last night watching it.
Nice. Um, I
It's
want to
been
talk
two
about,
years since that movie came out,
isn't that
and now
nuts?
we're talking about Batman year two, and that movie's set in year two.
And
It's
that
all
book
connected.
came out in 87. This is episode 187. It's all connected,
It's all
Javi.
connected.
It's all connected. This is crazy. This is nuts. I want to talk about the art. Because how can we not
Yes.
talk about the art? First off, I love these Tales of the Batman, Legends of the Dark Knight collections that have come out over like the past 10 years. Gives me a lot of physical access to a lot of comic book issues. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Whoever's in charge of the coloring doesn't do a great job. I did some
You give a
comparing and
little, you take a little away. Nice.
did some comparing and contrasting, and a fault that happens in these reprints, in these recolorings and stuff like that, is like over there. I've got, let's see, Len Wein, Marshall Rogers, Alan Brenner, Don Newton, Gene Colan, um, just some of those. They make it to where almost like their art looks pretty similar, and I'm
Mhm.
like, that couldn't be any further from the truth. Uh, And when I do a hold up of my trade with this, the coloring, some of the coloring just feels very lazy as well. Like even as something as simple as skies, which some people may say that that's not a big deal. Um, it kind of like, I don't know. That's what I mean. It's like something as much of a sky. It just seems like it went, let's just take this purple marker and go, burp. All right, sky's done. Whereas you look in the actual, like the trade, and I know it has to do probably with the paper as well. the trade has like the sky has different layers of coloring
Yeah.
and shading. And um something as much as like in the trade, Leslie's wearing a robe and it's got, it's white around the neck and it's white around the wrists and the rest is pink. And they're just like, nah, it's all pink. Like a brr. It's like stuff like that. It limits depth in like the alleys in Gotham and stuff like that. Cause like, the background's all gray. Whereas in the actual issues itself, it's like, no, here's some green, here's some brown, here's some gray, you know. So least impressed in looking at all of this in the Legends of the Dark Knight collection. However, on Hoopla, looking at your 30th deluxe edition digitally, and then my trade, the coloring looks the same. So I don't know if your collection has glossy paper because the Legends of the Dark Knight Alan
No, no,
Davis
no.
is glossy paper. My trade is more of the paper that I like.
Yeah, the
Not
deluxe is the paper that you like.
okay, cool.
Um, but the coloring on it matches like beat for beat
Your
the
trade,
my trade, which is
awesome.
more of a not quite as glossy, but it's still a very fine, very slick feeling glossy, heavy duty paper.
Hmm.
So now that you mentioned that, because I forgot to look at the Alan Davis book, but thinking about those images, yeah, there is a different, almost a flatter color to a lot of the stuff because I do have a few of those issues in print.
Hmm.
Well, they're both in print, the original issues. And yeah, the color timing is different for that. Like whatever remastering they did to make that
Yeah.
volume, it doesn't quite align with the other versions I'm used to.
And it kind of carries over into like the line of those books. So
Yeah.
like I said, I appreciate them when one comes out. I get it because it's a way to give me collections of issues and stuff, but the coloring's like, and the coloring in this, and I actually missed the name. So I said Steve Olive, Gloria Vasquez, and then Tom Ziuko. Um, they were on the
Tom
coloring of
Z.
this. Yeah, Tom Z. Thank you. I like the coloring of the issues. Um, I think I think it's well done. Let me just see because I noticed another.
You know, the
Nope, they're colored really, really well.
my
Both
1990
but
trade does not give credit to the colorists. It
sons of
does writer,
bitches.
penciler, inker, and letterer. When you go to each individual issue, it doesn't mention the colorist at all.
You know what? That's
So
not
I
the
don't
Batman
know
book
if
club
any of
way.
that, I mean, someone had to color the book, but
Yeah,
I don't know what the actual breakdown is. Although I do know that the associate editor of this is Mark Wade,
look at that.
for at
Heard of
least
him too.
my original trade.
Well done. He's worked his way up.
First
Uh,
printing June 1990.
so as we see, let's see, Alan Davis did the first issue, and something
Hmm.
that I really liked that I noticed is I noticed in these collections of like the multiple kind of what looks like, oh, this must have been the cover, but then you turn the page and it's like, wait, or was this the cover? It's because he did something cool, and it's not title cards, but it is like, oh, here's the cover, and then you turned it, and it's like Fear the Reaper, and it's got almost what looks like almost like a movie poster or something with it on
Hmm.
that first part, which is cool. And then the story starts, and I really liked how they did that for each issue. Just
Well,
like a little extra flavor.
yeah, it ties it in with year one,
Hmm.
where you had the cover, then you turn the page, and there's
Yes, it's
kind of like that teaser before you got into it.
you son of a bitch. I didn't even think of that. I'm learning something every day.
It's
But
funny too, the 1990 version. I know we keep comparing them. It says that um, he talks about the differences between Neil Adams and McFarlane and how did I see Neil Adams? Alan Davis, how he took inspiration from Neil Adams, but more of like the manta ray,
hmm.
organic looking Batman versus Todd McFarlane is more Bob Kane and explosion of black glass, which you can definitely see in the jaggedness of his cape. Um, but in the 1990 version, it says Alan and Paul had to leave detective for personal reasons, and it became DC's task to find a replacement. But then in my 30th anniversary edition, he doesn't talk about it that much, but he basically just hints that, DC changed some of the art without his permission,
Yes.
and then he noped out of the whole project because of that.
Yeah. So I think you hit on two things there that I was meaning to bring up also in Barr's intro in the deluxe edition. And he says about Alan's version of the Dark Knight is a manta ray and Todd's is a massive broken glass. I'm like, this is why you're a writer. Because that is a great description distinguishing the two.
It
And
is.
yet there's
And it's something
so
that's stuck with me for 34 years.
the Todd and broken glass part.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about a specific image. It's just like, oh my God, that's such a great description. And yet somehow I think you have Davis on one issue, McFarlane on three, and they kind of work together. It's not such a drastic change. You're like, oh, ah. Um, but yeah, I mean, you'd mentioned what I have seen is about DC changing. Let's see, that Davis's cover for the first chapter had been, or a chapter had been changed without his consent, or even worse, his knowledge. And he, being Davis, felt he couldn't continue under those circumstances. Um, so therefore is I guess, the answer to why Davis left and McFarlane jumped in which he said also, which it's funny when somebody points something out and it's like it's been there this whole time, but I didn't even think about it. And how he said that Todd is Todd has drawn Batman from the scripts of only two writers, Frank Miller and me. It was one of those, oh my God, that's true. Because it's one of those arguments like, no, that's not true. Wait, oh my God, it is true. Holy crap, that's true.
I mean, and part of it, is because he owns his own toy company. But it's funny for a guy who's done a cover,
Mhm.
3 issues, and then a Batman Spawn crossover, how much of his Batman has been captured in like a
Yeah.
three-dimensional form, be it a statue or an action figure specifically.
Specifically, this book, an action figure that came out, what was it, last year or the year before?
Uh,
Of him at the
no,
graveyard.
I feel like it came out when the Batman came out
Okay.
because that was the quality control issue on that and the
Hmm.
quality control issue on the Batman figures from the movie. Like
Gotcha.
it was not a good time for collecting his figures back then. I was striking out really hard.
That figure looked, and that definitely, when I say of broken glass, is like the
Yeah.
cape on that looked like it could cut you if you touch
Oh
it.
my God. That thing was intense, man.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
God bless Peter Vera for trying to help me find a replacement one after mine went to hell.
yeah.
But
Um,
it was not to
McFar
be.
McFarlane highlights in this, so I think he does a good job.
Yeah.
Obviously. I think it's good. The coloring is good. He has two specific, so towards the end of the second issue, close up on Gordon. This is after um the fight at the airport with Reaper and Batman what shoots the gun out of Gordon's hand or
Mhm.
something. And there's a profile shot of Gordon. I think that's penciled so freaking good of his face. And then in the third part where Gordon's in the office and he's talking to, I mean, I think is that Bukowski or whatever, and he's kind of got his fingers up like this over his face. I think that's penciled like really, really freaking good. And I feel like those stood out to me because they felt a little bit more like it's kind of like some of Vermejo's really early stuff where you look back on it now and you start to see, oh, here's a little snippet of the Joker style. Oh, here's a
Yeah.
little snippet of his style, the realistic factor, like that starts to creep in. And those to me crept in of like, oh, this is like Todd discovering that this is where he's going to go with his art.
Yeah.
And it's Gordon's face, but it's like it looks really, really good. And then of course there's Batman's cape, um, which
Which goes on
tip
for miles.
Yeah, but it's like the angular, like it's a static image that somehow is moving. Um, I've said that many times about Brayfogel's capes.
Mhm.
And I think that there's siblings here, maybe cousins, but first cousins, very close cousins. Um, given that like where there's standouts to be able to do that with Batman's cape, and I love realistic Batman, grounded Batman, but when it's comic books too, and the cape can just look freaking awesome, I'm like, hell yeah, give me that shit all day, every day.
Yeah, I definitely feel the Brayfogle comparisons, and it's tough because you can see, like you said, you see the McFarlane that's going to bring us Amazing Spider-Man and
Yeah, yeah,
Spawn. Like
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
some Bruce Wayne moments where I'm like, that looks like his Peter Parker.
Hmm.
Um, and there's so much detail um in the way he does his line work, especially when he starts inking at the end, that stands it apart from the more organic and smooth and fluid Davis. And I don't know if it just be like it might be my youth that I'm more accepting of it because like today I'd be like, oh, like as much as I love Batman Catwoman, and I like Liam Sharp's art, like it feels so out of place when he did
Yes.
those two fill-ins
Yep.
with what Clayman was doing. Like does not work.
No,
Takes me out of the story, changes the mood.
I agree.
But like maybe it's just my youth. I don't feel that way about year two, even though
I,
they are
I don't either.
vastly.
I don't either. I don't think that there's, as Barr worded it, they have such different styles, but like I don't know, somehow it just they go together in one trade fine.
And maybe because it's not interrupting the story. It's not like Davis started it and then McFarlane came in and then Davis came back. Like
Yeah,
it's one chapter and then the rest of it looks consistent. So maybe that has a part to play in it as well.
yeah,
Like there's a baton passing and that's what makes it work. I'm not really sure. But
yep,
I love the visuals of both these gentlemen. I think they did a phenomenal job. And I
yep.
really like Alan Davis's Batman. That was a big proponent why I got like Justice League The Nail, just so I could see more of his Batman style, and why I really appreciate about Full Circle because I feel, especially with it being like years later that he went back to doing Batman again, like he just nails every Batman image in Full Circle, which that's
Hmm.
another episode. But the groundwork is here in how he does Batman in year two.
Um, I want to get to your thoughts of the gotta partner up with Joe Chill.
Um, there are two types of people in this world.
All right.
there are there are people like me who like I read the greatest Batman stories of all time. Is that what it was? Whatever
Yes.
greatest Batman stories that came
Ever
out in like
told?
89 ever told. Who've read like the classics, who've read like the whole Joe Chill and Moxon
Hmm.
backstory and know to their core that Joe Chill killed the Waynes. And there are other people like my brother-in-law Eric, not Eric Holzamon,
Oh,
but
okay.
my brother-in-law Eric, who like that it's an unknown gunman and Batman is forever trying to, avenge them and doesn't know the answer of who killed his parents. And I'm in that first camp. I like whenever it's Joe Chill, be it Batman Begins or in the comics. I like knowing that's who it was. You can play with it every now and then. You can throw in a Jack Napier once in a while, but um, I liked having it harken back to that original iteration of the legend, and I like it pronounces the threat level of the Reaper because not only is he using the gun that killed his parents, but he has to like literally deal with the devil. Like he's got to do the unthinkable and partner with the man who killed his parents. Like that's how bad the threat the Reaper is that he's got to resort to these means to stop him. And in the end, he can overcome without the gun or with Joe Chill. He can do it on his own. So it's like a learning lesson as well. But I liked his inclusion, and I liked it. Just there's a lot of good character moments that come from it. Like when Chill sees Batman with the gun, and he's like, I used to carry a piece like that back in the
Yeah.
day. And Batman's like, you don't say.
I think Barr does a good job by including Joe Chill. It's adding a, like I said, at the end of that second issue of kind of like, oh damn. Um, it adds self-discipline to
Mhm.
Batman's characteristic that at that
Yeah.
young, at that young age and how he's going along with it. And with the comment, like you just said, if I used to have a piece like that, and Batman having to just kind of like let it roll off the shoulder, teaching him restraint and stuff. I'm um I like the fact that it's Joe Chill. In '89 that it was Jack Napier, it didn't bother me. I don't care.
Yeah.
I think if I have to choose Joe Chill or random, um, I'd almost think random because then that's like something Batman's always chasing. Whereas if it's Joe Chill dies, like that can add, or that can maybe make Batman feel like he has to close the book on it then because he's like, well, the guy who got my parents, he's done. I don't know,
Well, that
but
part's done, but his mission is still to make sure it never happens to anyone else.
correct. But that's
So
that's where if he doesn't have a name or face to put with it,
that
then
adds
it
to his
is
heroism is that he's still doing it,
constant
even though he got his vengeance, he got his own personal justice, but
vengeance.
his heroism comes from the fact that he's still doing it
I
so
it's
no one else has to suffer.
well, and there's a variety of characterization of Joe Chill and what happens to Joe Chill in comics spread out over the years. In Three Jokers,
Oh,
Johns
yeah.
has him almost more of like, what do you want to say? Of kind of like he was in a bad place in his life. It was an accident that it happened basically. He didn't mean for badness. It was just like I'm it's, I'm forgetting the wording in Begins of what Chill says to the judge in the courtroom. And he's like, sure, I was, hard up like a lot of people back then. Like that, I feel like that characterization of Joe Chill is kind of how he was in Three Jokers. And
Yeah.
here, Barr makes him like, no, he's scum.
Yeah.
He's flat out scum, which I think adds to that. Batman has to work with him. Batman
Mhm.
it could work some sympathy toward him if Chill was more of that sympathetic kind of and very much of like I was in the wrong place, the wrong time. But it's like, no, in this one, he's a hired gun. He's
Yeah.
he's a scum. Uh
He's like, if I need dope or women,
yeah, dope woman, I'll come
I'll
here.
come into you. If you need someone rubbed out, you'll come to me. Like,
So when
yeah,
you think
there's
of
no
that,
redeeming him.
exactly, no redemption for him. And you have that you take that into consideration while you're reading this stuff. It's like that's adding to Batman's characterization in this story because of his tolerance and his restraint and his discipline, because not only is he working with the guy that shot and killed his parents, but the guy is also like low level garbage. So, uh, I don't know. I don't know that I have a preference of kind of how is Joe Chill like or whatever, but I can say for this story, I think it totally works.
Yeah.
Um, do you have anything else, any other topics before we get into some questions?
No, I think the Joe Chill one was the last one that
That
I
was the last
wanted
one.
to talk
Last
about. Yeah.
bullet in the chamber, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you some questions then, Javi.
Yes, you've got a question?
What was your favorite part of Batman Year Two?
My favorite part.
Mm-hmm.
God, there's so many to choose from.
Gasp.
Um, I kind of like the just the ending. Even
Mm.
though it predates Mask of the Phantasm, I just I like the resoluteness of Batman as a character at the end and that final splash page of him going off into the night to do his thing. I think that it just speaks volumes to the character. Like he just went through this emotional ordeal. He was going to walk away from everything, which again is very Spider-Man. He's going to quit and hang it up. But
Spider-Man,
like
no
he
more.
was going to have this chance to be a normal to have a normal life. Um, and instead he's recommitting to, serving his community,
Hmm.
honoring the
Uh,
vow that he gave.
I
There's a
think
lot, man.
I think my favorite part is the opening Batman scene, him taking down the crooks. I love the I love the transition of in the studio with Gordon and the TV host, and like you can see that's almost like a movie
Yeah.
transition of like that's the TV, and then you zoom out and it's like now you're in an apartment where that's what's on TV, and then it's like criminals there that come home, and then it's the bat signal in the window, and then the flashlight is on the yellow oval, and then Batman just kind of
Yes.
kicks their ass. Even though there's a little bit of like some hokey little dialogue from Batman coming and stuff, anything, it's like, I still I like that scene quite a bit. I think it's good stuff.
Um, yeah, I take it back. There was something I wanted to mention. The transitions in this book are phenomenal. And not only that you just mentioned in that scene, like there's that window shot and you can see the bat signal in the background. And
Hmm.
by the third panel, the bat's replaced with Batman. Um, there's lots of shots of like uh Caspian suiting up as the Reaper, and
Hmm.
it's juxtaposed with Batman in a similar position, like getting ready to go out.
Yeah.
Just all the transitions in this book and the mirroring, like Caspian's looking at his stuff, Rachel is holding her habit, Batman's holding up his uniform. Uh, just so many transitions. All the
Good point.
transitions
Good
are
stuff.
just really well done.
That kind of leans right into the next question then of like, Javi, what's your favorite panel?
I'm really partial to the panel that it gets used in the intro of like Batman meeting the Reaper for the first time, where Batman's squatting just a little bit and the Reaper's just standing tall because it's so indicative of the challenge Batman's about to face. But
Hmm.
it's hard to pick just one. But I really like in my deluxe edition, which is page 99, the whole sequence of Batman finally confronting Chill. And like you get the flashback to the Wayne murders, and in between the two is this demonic looking Batman. There's no face, just two white eyes. The cape is really curled up on itself, and the flashbacks, like the paneling is really jagged. Like it's
Yeah.
just you feel this monster coming from behind these flashbacks. And then it ends with the page ends with like Batman revealing himself with no black eye makeup underneath his cowl. I love that whole page because it just
I'm
says so much.
surprised. I'm surprised because I thought my pick was going to be very obvious because I thought that's what everybody's pick is. And it's the image that Todd made a toy of him in the
Yeah,
graveyard with the cape and the moonlight and the big tombstone with the angel and the wings spread and everything. It's like, to me, for me, took no time at all. My favorite that page,
yeah.
like that
I was
image.
trying to be original because yeah,
Yeah.
that's that or the that's why I cheated in my favorite moment by
Cheater.
including that that last page
Cheater.
because that's I mean it's so good they made a statue of that too.
Yeah. I mean,
But
what
yeah,
otherwise, like, like, I'm not gonna say like what image because there are good ones, but it's kind of like I don't know. That's a bit of a showstopper to me. I love it.
yeah.
Good stuff. Would you like to see this adapted in animation?
I mean, I feel like we kind of did a little bit with Mask of the Phantasm. Like Mask of the Phantasm is like you've got your adaptations like year one in The Dark Knight Returns, where they're very much like we're just taking this and putting it over here and not changing it.
Hmm.
Like Mask of the Phantasm is like the Batman Hush of animation stuff, where it takes like ideas but then tricks it up to make it a new experience, or like Gotham back by Gaslight. I kind of feel like Mask of the Phantasm is that type of adaptation for year two. But a straight up, I mean, I would always say
Straight
yes
up.
to
Okay.
a straight up year two adaptation. I wouldn't keep Mackenzie. I would probably ditch Supernatural and try and go with a new voice though for Batman.
Hmm.
I don't know who that is though. Perfect
Me.
world it would have been Conroy,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah.
I
And
definitely
then
think they
Hawk, and then you.
I definitely think they could do this. They can make it standalone. They can make it cool and creepy. Um, there's enough in here. There's enough in the
Lean into the
design,
R rating of it.
enough into the story that you could like. This is not going to be a Phantasm rehash. I think they could absolutely do this as its own standalone movie. Maybe you want to scrap the year two stuff. Just call it Fear the Reaper. I don't know if title wise you could do that because I'm not even gonna hum the song, but there's a song with cowbells. Name the same thing, but which I love it. It's my favorite classic rock song. But
I mean,
I
it's in
think that I don't
Halloween,
I
so it's got
just
to be
feel
cheap, right?
I hopefully. Um then at least. But no, I think they totally could do this. And I think that and it would could they could flesh out 75 minutes, 80 minutes. Rachel could get some story that she needs. Uh,
Yeah.
and you can flesh some stuff out, and you can really like some bangers of scenes with the Reaper and stuff. I think this could be a home run. They could take the source material, which, like I said, I think is good, not great, and they could really flesh it out to make it great in animated form as a movie, not one 20-minute episode. No, I think they could do a movie. And that's you know what, and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. You know? What? That's all I got. All right,
How
final.
does how does
Go
this
ahead.
fit into the pantheon of the Batman years for you? Like as a kid, having grown up with like year three kind of came out around the time of 89. So like year one, year two, year three were very cohesive. I expected back then for there to be a year four, which never materialized. Where does year two fall for you
I'd
in
have
the three of these?
I'd have to like in ranking
Yeah.
the three. Oh, year one, year three, year two.
So at the bottom then.
Yeah. I thought you meant like as far as like a timeline. I'd have to reread, but I think Long Halloween complicates the story's placement in the timeline.
Yeah.
That became more so canon. And then Prey, you got to fit Prey in there, which I think could be a better direct follow up to year one, which you and I talked about. I think that
Mhm.
was that your first time on the show?
No, that was like my
As second, third,
third, I think.
okay. Um, so yeah, with that timeline, but I mean, it's good. I think it's a fun story. It feels where this is more if you're just looking for more entertainment and not like heavy. I think this is one that you could grab and just kind of be a little bit more like, oh, cool, look at that. Oh, wow, wow, wow. As opposed to some stuff that's like deeper, flat out, like maybe stronger Batman stories, perhaps better Batman
Mhm.
stories, but it's almost like, oh, this is more serious. I really want to take my time with this. Whereas year two, you can just kind of grab and the breeze of a read
Yeah,
and be entertained by it.
it's very it feels like such a quick read. Like it felt like it took no time at all to reread this. Um and maybe that might just be my familiarity with the story, but yeah, like if you've got the time, it doesn't take very long and it's a really for me it was a really satisfying story. I don't know where I would put it though, because I do
Your
have a
favorite.
soft spot
You already
for it.
said it's your favorite Batman story of all
Yeah.
time.
But I really love year three, and I appreciate how each year is done in a it's not like Die Hard and Die Hard 2, where it's like, how can the same thing happen to the same guy twice? Like each year's story is completely different from the one before in terms of focus,
Hmm.
and how the narrative is structured, and I appreciate that about it. Like they are very unique storytelling
Hmm. I agree.
ways of doing it.
I think that's a good point. 3 years, three totally different years.
Yeah.
Three very different. Uh, well, thanks for coming back on, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Why don't you go ahead and plug away anything and everything?
Oh, got all the things, man. I
All
got
the things. You got all the
all the
words.
things. I got the jamesbonddossier.com. I need to
snap.
write my review for the new 007 comic, which is written by Garth Ennis, which
Obviously.
that's something weird. That was on my bingo card. I've got my Flash YouTube channel, Up to Speed with Wally West, still working on doing the summary for that first annual. It's a doozy. And there's Spider-Man stuff. I'm, a contributor sometimes on the Spidey Dude Experience, where we interviewed Greg Weisman, who you may know from doing the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon and Young Justice. He's got a new Spider-Men comic coming out in March. So we got to interview him, and he's an awesome guy. And of course, BatmanOnFilm.com, where I'm reviewing Catwoman, Batman the Brave and the Bold, the mediocre Batman and Robin, sorry, Peter, Batman the Gargoyle of Gotham, which is exceptional. And I got a YouTube video that I'm working on unboxing the Hot Toys Batman,
Nice.
the Batman figure. Finally came 2 years after the fact from the movie. And then, of course, you can always find me on the Comic Binge, just randomly guest starring. And then Chris Clow and I on that YouTube channel have a series within a series, Nights Never Die,
Woo!
where we are going through Grant Morrison's Batman run. So
You got some things.
lots of things going on.
Lots of things. Head there. Specifically the Batman dog. Because it's Batman. As for the Batman Book Club, follow on Twitter/X and Instagram at the Batman BC for latest episode drops, upcoming episodes, and sometimes even some giveaways. Exciting episodes are coming as well. Make sure to subscribe to Batman Book Club's YouTube channel. And if you want to support the show, there's a variety of ways you can do that. Like I said at the top of the show, patreon.com/the Batman BC, tpublic.com, type in TBBC for the Batman Book Club. But if you want to support the show and you don't want to spend any money at all, it's 100% A-OK. Easiest, quickest, most impactful thing you can do is rate and review the show. So whichever podcast source you listen to, Apple, Amazon, Google Play, iHeartRadio, just go to the rate and review page and rate and review the show. Because the more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as we all know, the word is panic. So I'm gonna cut that out. So for Javi Trujillo, I am Ryan Lauer, and until next time, we might buy comics.